Hello everyone, I'm Jay.
I'm Val.
And today we're in Godfrey, Illinois at the Lewis and Clark Community College at the Hathaway Cultural Center. And today we're here for the Haunted America Conference 2023. It was started by an author named Troy Taylor. You know a lot about Troy Taylor, don't you?
I do. He is an author of supernatural, ghost, history, unexplained things. His books are awesome. If you've never heard of them, you need to check them out.
Yeah, he started this conference in 1997, which is, 26 years ago, right?
Yep.
And he considers himself like the OG of haunted conferences. And his conference is a little bit different because it's speaker based with presentations and discussions, question and answers. A little bit different than the conventions that you would go to with the professional people sitting at tables and getting autographs and stuff.
Yeah.
So, what do you expected today?
So I'm super excited because this year it's an all-female panel, and some of the speakers are awesome. So I'm super excited about that. They have a vendor room, so you can buy books and
Oddities, yeah.
Definitely. And then they also have a silent auction.
Actually, it's a raffle-based
auction.
Yeah.
With all kinds of strange and obscure things that you can win. So super excited to see what they have there.
Awesome. So come along with us as we Jay and Val around the Haunted America Conference 2023.
So another cool story from the church. I was hosting a private tour for some coworkers, and we were going inside the church. It was the end of the tour, and they take everybody in the sanctuary, tell them all the stories. We go into the back room, tell the stories back there. 1934, a minister hanged himself in that back area. So told the stories back there. I said, guys, if you want to take some photos, this will be your opportunity, but nobody leave this area. You either stay in this back room, you stay in the sanctuary, nobody go beyond that. I said, once you're all done, we'll go out towards the front and we'll all leave together. So finally everybody started bottling up towards the front of the church, and out the door we went. Now, whenever I walked out of the church, there was a young lady standing on the steps. She was part of the tour, but she was not a coworker, so I didn't know who she was there with. And I said, hey, who are you here with? And she said, Ryan. And I said, well, where's he at? I don't know. All right, we'll call his cell phone and find out where he's at. So she calls his phone, and I hear her say, what are you doing down there? Which meant that Ryan went into the basement by himself. And that is something the tour guides would never do. In that church, we would never go into the basement by ourselves. And I told her, I said, tell him to get upstairs. I said, we'll meet him in the back room. So she tells him. So I bring 2 volunteers in with me because I was not going in by myself. We walk through the sanctuary, we walk through a pocket door, and then we're standing in that back room looking down this hallway. And about halfway down the hallway to the right is another hallway. That's how you get to the basement. So we're standing there, we're just talking, we're waiting for Ryan. We hear somebody coming up the stairs, we hear the basement door open, we hear somebody coming down the hall, and then Ryan turns the corner and starts coming towards us. Now, am I hearing music? I know, I'm just teasing. That is so rude. You think about what you just did. So, Ryan turns the corner and he's walking towards, you get it. Did you guys see that orb? So Ryan turns the corner, he's walking towards us, and I said, Ryan, what are you doing? He said, oh, I just want to see what the basement looked like. I said, come on, it's time to go. So Ryan's walking towards us. He had already taken several steps towards us when all of a sudden the dark shadow steps out of the hallway. Now, it wasn't Ryan's shadow because the shadow was late to the party. Ryan had already been walking towards us when the shadow came out. And the best way I can describe this is, first off, my name's Luke. I was born in 1977, so I grew up a Star Wars fan. So, yes. So let me put it into Star Wars terms. If you've ever seen Episode 1, at the very end, before the epic battle, Darth Maul is on one side of the force field, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are on the other side, and Darth Maul is just pacing back and forth, staring at Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, waiting to kill them. That's what the shadow was like to me. You know, not that it was going to kill Ryan, although the story would be much better. The shadow was making sure that Ryan was leaving, because Ryan wasn't supposed to be in the basement. So when I saw the shadow, I said, Ryan, it's time to go. Come on, let's go now. So Ryan knew something was wrong. So he's running towards us. As he's running towards us, I hear the door to the front of the church opening and closing because one of my volunteers was already out the door. And then the other one tried to run, and I horse-collared him. And I yanked him back, and I said, do you see that? And he said, the shadow? And I said, yeah. And I said, let's go check it out. Okay, so I don't know what the science is behind this, but if you suggest something like that to somebody who's terrified, you can actually hear their butt pucker. Because when I said that to Travis, you just hear everything tighten up like aluminum foil. And he said, are you serious? And I said, it's what we're supposed to do. So we started walking down the hall towards where the shadow was. Now as we got down to where the shadow was, it just completely dissipated, it was gone. But when you got to where the shadow was, it was really cold in that spot. It was a definite cold spot. You could step into it and be cold, and take a couple steps back and be warm. But one of my ideas with what a cold spot is I think if you step into a cold spot, you're not standing on a ghost. You know, and a lot of people feel that a cold spot means that's a ghost right there. To me, what that means is spirits need energy to manifest, and heat is a form of energy. And if they're pulling the heat out of an area, causing that spot to be cold, you better start paying attention to what's going on around you. Because maybe they're using that energy from the heat to do something else. Maybe all of a sudden a door is going to open and slam shut. You know, maybe over here you're going to hear a voice. Maybe something over here is going to fall off a shelf. So I think whenever you encounter a cold spot, start paying attention to other things around you, because maybe something else is going to happen.
One night there I had a tour, and when everybody comes in, we bring them in. Hopefully we have a helper, and they help, and everybody sits in the pews. Well, while you do that, the guides, we disappear. What we're doing is walking back to the office section, and we leave a donation for the church. You know, for that was what we were doing so much per person. So that's about the only time I'm actually alone in that church, or so I thought. One night as everybody was sitting down, I walked to the back section towards where we leave the envelope, and I'm in an open foyer. Over here are doors from the outside to come in. This is the hallway into the offices with a schoolroom door right here. Right over here is the schoolroom door. That's the steps that lead downstairs. And then on the other side of the hall here is a janitor's closet that's always locked. The classroom door over here was always locked. So I came in, and I have to walk through that area to drop off the envelope. I walked and I got in the middle of the foyer, and my spider sense was tingling. It's like, oh crap. That's not the word I used, but oh crap. The door to the basement, the janitor's closet, and the classroom doors all opened and slammed shut at the same time. And the classroom doors have those heavy latches. They don't slam like that. I don't like having my back exposed. So now I'm in the middle of this foyer with those doors opening and slamming shut, and I'm all by myself. Being a Ghostbuster, I had to go over to the classroom door, and it has that pane of glass that's in it. I got my flashlight, and because the door wouldn't open, and I said, I've got to look through the window. But if there's somebody looking back at me, I'm just going to have a freaking heart attack and end it right now. Luckily, nobody was there. So I go back and I finish up the tour, and I had some friends there. So when the tour was over, I took them down into the basement, and we were talking about different things. I had a $200 tri-field meter. That was a lot of money several years ago. And I had it down there. It was doing some stuff. So we're down there a while, and we all leave. So we're outside, everybody says goodbye, we'll see you later. I'm getting in my car, I realize I left that $200 tri-field meter down in the cellar of the church. Well, I'm more cheap than I am afraid. I paid good money for that darn thing, and I'm going to get it. So I stood outside the church door, and I was like, okay, let's go. And I took off. I could run, this is before several of the back operations. So I took off. The gates of hell could have opened up next to me, and I wouldn't have seen them, because I ran straight down, that meter was right there, and right back out I went. And I survived. One of the few times. Again, I'm more cheap than I am afraid of something like that.
morning. Thank you very much for being here. I know some of you were doing the late night ghost hunt last night till about 2 a.m. How was that? Was it awesome? Active? Anything follow you back to your bedroom? It's always exciting. Anything in the car? Because you know that can happen. So I think next year, to entice people to be here this early, I think Troy should have like a mimosa bar. Right over there, off to the stage, and a beer truck in the parking lot for us 1980 party animals. So, all right. Welcome to my presentation on past lives, but I want to tell you a little bit about myself in case we're new friends. I recognize a lot of friends here. Yeah, hello. The check is in the mail. Thank you very much for coming. I was afraid there'd only be 5 of my family members here today, so this is great. As Troy said, I own Haunted Heartland Tours, and I have been bringing people on my adventures for 22 years. I was a smart cookie because I started doing the paranormal a year before TAP's Ghost Hunters was on TV. So when that happened, things went through the roof. Back then, you had to explain to people what EMF was. You had to explain to them what EVP is. And now it's like a commonplace hobby and common words for people. Everybody knows a ghost hunter or is a ghost hunter. And I think it's one hobby that can bring everybody together. We'll move along. As Troy mentioned, I am an author. I enjoy writing, and I love taking people to locations that I explore. So it's always a lot of fun to write a book about a location. And my very first book was Haunted Stark County. If you're familiar with Canton, Ohio, that's where that book took place at. Second book was The Haunted History of the Ohio State Reformatory. How many of you have been to that Shawshank prison? The place is amazing. Then you have The Haunted History of the West Virginia Penitentiary in Moundsville. How many people have been to that prison? It's the same people. You guys are scaring me. Just something about the smell of prisons in the middle of the night that a ghost hunt. I know I'm weird. How many lives can you have in the past? You could have 1. You could have 50. If I was to give you a certain number, I'd be full of bullcrap because nobody really knows. Although these past lives can influence the way that we are today. They can influence our hobbies, the type of music we like, the type of crappy people we pick as a husband or a wife or a partner, because you continually do it over and over, and I've been married 6 times. Well, gee, you're paying back some karma, aren't you? So you can be any ethnicity, any religion, any sex, any gender, any time frame at all. There is no stopping this train of past life regressions. I just love it. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating subject. So let's talk about some signs that you may have had a past life. And some of you have probably experienced this, and you're way ahead of me. So a desire to travel to a certain country or a region. I know for me, I could not wait to get to Ireland and Scotland, and I see a few of you that have gone with me over there. For years, I've been traveling over there. I think I've been there 9, 10 times so far. After about the 3rd time to Ireland and Scotland, I decided to do a DNA test. 68% Irish and Scottish. Who would have known? We were told we were German growing up. Certain time frame. Is anybody in here a reenactor? Anybody? A couple? Okay, what time frame? Civil War era? Okay, I was too as well. I was drawn to the Civil War years, 1861 to 1865. For some reason, even as a little kid, I was really into the clothing. I remember being like 9 years old and watching Scarlet, Gone with the Wind. I fell in love with that. I wanted to walk in a hoop skirt, drop a handkerchief, and have somebody pick it up for me. I wanted Mammy in my bedroom in the morning lacing me up in a corset. I just loved that whole era. I didn't know what it was. Flash ahead, 1995, I become a Civil War reenactor, and it felt very natural. I have been here before. Have you ever gone on vacation or visited somebody or just in your travels and you drive around a curve? Oh my God, I've been here before. This looks really familiar. The road, the trees, the houses. I know when I walked the cobblestone streets of Edinburgh for the first time, I looked down at my feet and the cobblestones, and it was like I had a flashback. And my shoes were different. And it was so strange because I flipped into that, and then I flipped within a second right back into now. So I know that in a past life I walked the streets of Edinburgh. Vivid dreams, often recurring. Voices from beyond. You have unreasonable fears. Does anybody here have a phobia? Water, heights, trains, airplanes. So just yell it out. Snakes. Okay, all right. There's some really irrational things I'm hearing up here. I'll see you after the presentation. Free therapy at my table today. So let's talk about a little bit. We're going to get into phobias here in a few minutes, but I'm afraid of water. Yet I fly over the Atlantic Ocean at night to get to Ireland. So I overcome that phobia. But there are some people who do not want to get on an airplane at all. Scared to death of that. They're afraid of crashing. Okay? I don't like water in my face. Is anybody else like that? When I swim, I'm the one doing the dog paddle with my head above water. So all my life I've been like, why am I so afraid of water? I have a good friend, she's a good friend now, but she wasn't back then. This is when we first started to get to know each other, who was a psychic medium in Ohio. And she did a past life regression on me, and I was purely skeptical. We had just met, purely skeptical of psychics. I'm sure a lot of you are as well. It's like, prove to me, then I'll believe. But she was doing a past life regression on me, and she was using tarot cards, and she said, have you ever wondered why you're afraid of water? So I did my best poker face, you know, like, oh, I'm afraid of water, you know, that kind of person. And she goes, yes, you have a fear of water. It's because in a past life, she said, you're sitting in a long hall with tapestries on the wall, big long table, and you're lifting up a heavy goblet. You choke on the water and you aspirate it into your lung. You get pneumonia and you almost die. After that, you don't want water around your face. And then I looked at her and I went, because she was right. And it kind of unsettled me. That started my journey down the paths of, you know, reincarnation, past lives. Can we access those memories? So that was my experience with a phobia. Just like, have you ever seen these little kids that can play the violin at like age 2? And they can just rip off a concerto or whatever, and it's natural. And they're a genius. I bet you anything, in a past life, they played that instrument. That is why they're so proficient in it at such an early age. Or a child who paints. Or somebody who's just a childhood genius. Last but not least, hobbies or collections. Anybody here collect antiques, other than your husband or spouse or partner? Okay. Have you ever wondered why you collect old things? I mean, there's theories that you lived in that time frame of whatever you're collecting. So I find that really interesting. I have a friend who collects, she's just really into spools of thread. She has like 100 of them in a box. And I'm like, you don't even sew. Why? And she goes, there's just something about them. I take them out every once in a while and I look at the colors and I put them away. They just make me happy. So I wonder in a past life, you know, now I'm thinking, you were a seamstress. Traveling down the highway at a high rate of speed, I'll be driving, never trust a psychic to drive your car. So she's driving, or I'm driving, and she looks over at me and she goes, do you see those people that just passed me in the car? Yeah. I'm like, yeah, I saw them. She goes, let me tell you what's going on with them. For the love of God. All right. So, traveling around, you walk down a street, boom, you feel, oh my gosh, I know where we are. I felt like I've walked this street before. That is Deja Vu.
So we're now in the vendor room.
We'll see what.
Val's checking out some things, short and stout designs.
These are really cool.
So Valerie's checking out stuff here in the vendor room. There's a little bit of everything here. There's people selling merchandise. There's the actual speakers that are selling their books and their wares. There's some podcast people here. Maybe even a medium or two. There's just a whole lot going on here in the vendor room. So, Valerie, you did one of these, right?
Yes, I did.
And what is it?
So she'll draw who's around you. She'll pick up a presence that's around you and draw the person that she sees with you at the time. She did a drawing. I'll show that at the end of the video. And it's kind of eerie of who it looks like, so I'll keep you in suspense till the end.
Yeah, we're going to do a reveal of your haul, because boy, did you refinance our apartment for this one.
Yeah, Jay let me come shopping by myself a little bit.
Absolutely. And this is called Spirit Portraits. Here's sort of a wide view of the vendor room. This is insane. It's like double the size of last year for sure.
Okay, so as Troy said, my name is Heather Moser. I'm from Ohio, literally in the foothills of Appalachia. And my presentation is called Facing the Faceless. So first, I want to talk about what the project is so that, it was kind of glanced over a little bit with Troy, but to go into a little more depth. It's an exploration of various headless ghost stories that I can trace back to actual people. Because we're all familiar in one way or another with the story of a headless ghost or a headless horseman or whatnot. But sometimes when you go back through newspaper articles, you can actually find names associated with these people. And I'm someone who has gone very deep into my family history, and so I thought one day, I think I could use that skill set to search for these people and then find out who they are. And by doing so, then if I write it down and I share it with you, then now these people are remembered beyond just being a headless ghost that scared everybody back in the 1800s. So the first story that I want to get into is Samuel Barlow, which by happenstance, he actually lived within, I think, 45 minutes of here. In the old Vulcan Ironworks in St. Louis is where his ghost was spotted. But Samuel Barlow, so this man, as is typical for many headless ghosts, had a horrible ending to his life, which, by the way, I should say now, one may think a headless ghost was decapitated. And yes, that does tend to happen. That's usually typical, but that's not always the way it is. With Samuel Barlow, actually, he did commit suicide, so it was still a violent death. But he just took a bunch of morphine. There was no head being decapitated. So what caused Samuel to get to that point in his life? He had many incidents occurring in the months and years leading up to his suicide that were horrible. First one, well, I don't know if it was the first one for his life, but one of the most significant ones surely was relocating from New York to St. Louis. He did this because his wife of several years had passed away. They had 7 children together. Only 6 of them were surviving by the time she passed away, because one had died in infancy. So he moved to St. Louis after his wife had died. That sucks. Step 1. Step 2, one day he's fishing around the Mississippi. Everything seems fine, and then he comes across a dead body of a 30 to 35-year-old male. They don't know what happened. They weren't able to solve the case, but certainly very disturbing. A couple years later, the rental house, he was a very well-to-do man, by the way. He was very, multiple properties. Well, one of his properties caught fire, which things happen to do pretty often, actually, in the 1800s. And his rental nearly killed 2 widows. And literally the day before he decided to take his life, he had watched a storage facility just right across the river burn to the ground. I would imagine that he had some financial leanings into that as well. But at that time, they estimated that the damage, and we're talking, like I said, the 1800s, the damage then was around $80,000 of damage or something, which would be ridiculous by today's standards. I mean, it was ridiculous then too. So the day before he passed away, he watched all of this burn before him. He also was riddled with painful illnesses. They said rheumatism, lots of things that this was not the first attempt that he had. The first one was also with morphine. But this one worked. So they said that he had gone into his room after dinner and had a smile on his face, and he told his daughter, who he was living with at the time, that everything was going to be okay and he was fine. And then he went to lay down, and she went to check on him later because that was uncharacteristic of him to be in such joyous spirits. And by that point, it was too late to save him. So he passes away. Within 2 weeks, the first inkling of a ghost presence starts making the newspapers around the Vulcan works, or ironworks. So they talk about the first inkling of the ghost presence was last Friday night, so roughly a week and a half after he passed away. There's an old deserted frame house. Lights were seen flashing in and out in such a marvelously swift manner that the eye was dazzled. So when I read this, I was just imagining like a rave or something is kind of what they were watching occur. There were no shutters on the house. Nothing could be seen but the dancing lights that made spectators believe a number of spirits were holding a night revelry. See? So there was a rave. Upstairs and downstairs flew forked fire until finally one bolt flew out upon the prairie and finally disappeared. These strange displays were seen by several people. So step 1, this is before he shows up as Samuel Barlow. Just all kinds of weird stuff starts happening. Then, the night watchman for the old Vulcan works, he had heard that there were stories. There was actually one of the widows, not one of the ones that almost died, but they were apparently a lot of widows then. There was a widow nearby who swore that she saw this specter come out of the house that Samuel Barlow had previously lived in before he passed away. The way that she described it was he had no head and he had no arms and legs. It was just a body that was barely covered by any clothing, but she knew that it had to be Samuel Barlow because he didn't exist. This thing didn't exist prior to 2 weeks. So anyway, this had gone around, the community heard about it. This man, Joseph Polchek, night watchman in the area, he didn't believe it. He pondered over the falsity of the ghost story when he happened to glance on the prairie in front of him, and right there, visible to his skeptical eyes and not but 100 yards away, was the apparition. It swayed to and fro with an air of proprietorship. So he gazed at it for 5 minutes, okay? Which is long. For anybody who's gone on investigations for 5 minutes for something to just stand there, I mean, this is the kind of thing that you dream of, right? You got time to get your phone out, take pictures. So he's staring at it for 5 minutes, then he grabs his gun and he decides that he's gonna get closer. But the thing is, as he gets closer, when he gets within so many feet, it disappears. And this is something that repeats through several nights. People will see it, they would get close to it, and then boom, it's gone. It says, the specter appeared to dance even more gleefully as he shot at it, which didn't work, by the way, it just went right through it. He danced even more gleefully, and without saying goodbye, it just disappeared. He then returned to his watch house and danced no more ghost dances. So yeah, that was that was Samuel Barlow.